Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, July 20th, 2023. I'm away for a few days of vacation, so today and for the rest of this week and next week, you'll be seeing some devotionals from the archives. Just out of curiosity, I looked at the devotionals that have been viewed the most. So today and for the next several days, you'll see the most popular devotionals based on the number of views that they've had. Today, a devotional on spirituality that first played on March 16th, 2022. What is spirituality? We talk a lot about it these days. The word has been around for centuries in the English language, but its use exploded around 1990 and shows little sign of dropping off. It is one of those terms that different ones of us use in very different ways, so that when two different people talk about it, they may find themselves talking past one another. In his first letter to the Corinthians, Paul uses the term, but not in quite the same way people often use it today. The way he uses the term can help us understand what it means for the Christian life. The major problem facing the church in Corinth was internal divisions, characterized by competing factions. But Paul also sees it as a symptom of a deeper problem, a spiritual problem, if you will. At the beginning of chapter 3, he says, "And so, brothers and sisters, I could not speak to you as spiritual people, but rather as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for solid food. Even now you are still not ready, for you are still of the flesh. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not of the flesh and behaving according to human inclinations? For when one says, 'I belong to Paul,' and another, 'I belong to Apollos,' are you not merely human?" The pressing issue was the presence of factions in the church, each loyal to a different leader who had been part of the church's founding and early growth. As Paul makes clear a few verses later, he had planted the church, and then Apollos had come along afterward to help the church grow. This is simply a fact of life. This is how churches got started and grew. It was a team effort. But in Corinth, it had become a source of internal division between people loyal to one or to the other of these men. Now, one of the dynamics at work in Corinth was also a sense of competition among people, going back to that idea of debate and argumentation. People debated to prove their intellectual superiority. Only now, the competition changed to competition over people's spiritual maturity. Followers of Paul thought they possessed a more mature form of the faith than the followers of Apollos. Same with the followers of Apollos. They believed they possessed a higher form of spirituality than did the followers of Paul. To all of these people, Paul pronounces a pax on both of their houses, even on those who identified with him rather than with Apollos. Once again, Paul uses terminology which would have been very familiar to them, but he turns it on its head. They would have been very familiar with the idea of gradations within the faith, some people being more spiritually mature than others. What Paul says is that they are both spiritually immature, precisely because of their infighting. Paul goes one step further here. In fact, he's pretty insulting in what he says. He says they're not yet spiritual people at all, but are still people of the flesh. Pretty bold language. And what is his evidence? On what does he base this charge? Again, he bases this on the fact that they are divided over such petty things like personal loyalties to Paul or to Apollos. Spiritually mature people would not behave the way they did. But wait, why call them people of the flesh? Isn't that what we associate with sexual immorality? Well, In Paul's eyes, sexual immorality can be one manifestation of the life of the flesh, but it is by no means the only one or even the most important one. Self-centeredness, egotism, belief in one's superiority as over against others, these are the more important indicators of a life of the flesh, a life of spiritual immaturity. To be spiritually mature is, for Paul, to put such petty things away, to lift others up, and not to insist on one's own way. Later in this letter, he'll talk about love. What he describes in that chapter, chapter 13, is more than just love. As we'll see, what he's describing is spiritual maturity. It would be easy to read this letter and to look down our noses on the Corinthians. But as usual, Paul's description applies to us today every bit as much as it did to the Corinthians. Anytime we think of ourselves as more spiritually mature or advanced than others, anytime we think of ourselves as more learned and wise, anytime we think of ourselves as more virtuous, in short, anytime we think of ourselves as superior to others, we simply prove Paul's point. To be spiritually mature is to put aside petty differences and to live in peace with our fellow believers. Now may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.